The stars had always been cold and uncaring. But for humanity, they held a promise of something greater. When the first alien ship appeared above Earth in the year 2147, humans thought their dreams had finally come true. They were not alone in the universe. There were others out there, friends waiting to be made, knowledge waiting to be shared. They were wrong. The Galactic Concord was a coalition of 47 spacefaring species. They had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. They had built empires that spanned entire star systems. They had created technologies that humans could barely understand. And when they looked at humanity, they saw nothing but children playing with toys. The aliens did not hide their feelings. The Velthari, tall and graceful beings with silver skin, called humans the short-lived ones, because human lives lasted only a century, while theirs lasted for 1,000 years. The Morkani, insect-like creatures with hive minds, found it disgusting that humans thought as individuals. The Thessari, ancient beings of pure energy, refused to even acknowledge that humans had souls. But none were worse than the Kralith. The Kralith were a reptilian species with scales the color of dried blood. They stood 7 feet tall with claws that could tear through metal. Their society was built on one simple idea: the strong take from the weak. For 10,000 years, they had conquered and enslaved lesser species. They had built their empire on the bones of those who could not fight back. When they looked at humanity, they saw prey. Ambassador Elena Vasquez had served as humanity's voice in the Galactic Concord for 15 years. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes. She smiled often and spoke softly. The aliens thought she was weak. They did not see the steel beneath her gentle surface. Every week, she stood before the Concord and presented humanity's complaints. The Kralith had destroyed another human trading ship. The Kralith had claimed another system that humans had spent decades terraforming. The Kralith had kidnapped colonists from the border worlds, and those who returned were never the same. Every week, the Concord dismissed her complaints. The Kralith are a founding member of this body, the Velthari representative would say. Humans are newcomers. You must learn your place. Elena would nod politely and return to her seat. She would file another report. She would wait for justice that never came. Back on Earth, people asked why humanity did not fight back. The answer was simple but hard to accept. Humanity was young. Their ships were slow. Their weapons were weak. A war with the Kralith would end in extinction. So humanity did what it had always done throughout its history. It endured. It adapted. It waited. 200 years passed. In that time, humanity spread across the stars. They built colonies on worlds that other species considered impossible to inhabit. Worlds with extreme heat. Worlds with extreme cold. Worlds with crushing gravity and poisonous air. The aliens called Earth a death world because it was filled with predators, disasters, and diseases. But humans had survived that death world for millions of years. They knew how to thrive in places that killed others. They also learned. Human scientists studied alien technology and found ways to improve it. Human engineers built ships that were faster and stronger each year. Human soldiers trained in secret, preparing for a day they hoped would never come. But they never stopped smiling. They never stopped being polite. They never gave the galaxy any reason to see them as a threat. Admiral James Okonkwo was one of the few who knew the truth. He was a tall man with dark skin and eyes that had seen too much. He commanded the human defense fleet from a station hidden in the asteroid belt of a forgotten system. On paper, humanity had only a small peacekeeping force. In reality, Okonkwo commanded a fleet that grew larger every year. How much longer? His officers would ask. As long as it takes, he would answer. We are not ready yet. And when we act, we must be certain. We will only get one chance. So the waiting continued. The Kralith grew bolder with each passing decade. They saw humanity's patience as proof of weakness. They pushed harder and harder, taking more and more. Border disputes became massacres. Trade disagreements became blockades. The Kralith ambassador would laugh openly at Elena Vasquez during Concord meetings. Look at the little human, he would say. She files her papers and makes her speeches, and nothing ever changes. This is the nature of prey. They complain, but they never bite. Elena would smile and say nothing. But those who knew her well could see something changing behind her eyes. A darkness growing, a countdown reaching its end. On the colony world of New Meridian, life continued as normal. It was an ice world that humans had spent 50 years transforming into a home. 2,300,000 people lived there. They had built cities under domes that kept out the cold. They had schools and hospitals and parks where children played. Maria Santos was one of those children. She was 6 years old with black hair and a smile that could light up a room. Her favorite possession was a stuffed rabbit named Mr. Whiskers that her grandmother had made for her. She carried it everywhere. Her parents were scientists who studied the ice caves beneath the surface. Her older brother wanted to be a pilot someday. Her grandmother told her stories about Earth, a world Maria had never seen but dreamed about often. They were a happy family. They had no enemies. They had done nothing wrong, but they lived on a world that the Kralith had decided to claim. It did not matter that the Kralith had ignored this system for 10,000 years. It did not matter that humans had done all the work to make it livable. The Kralith High Command had decided that this system contained sacred ancestral grounds. This was a lie. But lies did not matter to those with power. When the Kralith ambassador informed the Concord of their claim, Elena Vasquez stood immediately. "This system has been registered as human territory for 50 years, she said. 2 million people live there. You cannot simply take it." The Kralith ambassador smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "We are not taking anything," he said. "We are reclaiming what was always ours. If humans have built structures on our sacred land, that is unfortunate, but it is not our concern. The Concord has rules about territorial disputes," Elena pressed. "There must be negotiations. There must be a process." The Velthari representative raised a hand for silence. "The Concord recognizes the historical claims of founding members," he said. "Humanity's presence in that system was always temporary. You have 6 months to relocate your people." Elena stared at him for a long moment. Her face showed nothing, but her hands trembled slightly. "And if we refuse?" she asked quietly. The Kralith ambassador laughed. "Then you will learn what happens to prey that forgets its place." That night, Elena Vasquez sent a message to Admiral Okonkwo. It contained only 4 words: "Begin final preparations." The Admiral read the message 3 times. Then he closed his eyes and let out a long breath. They had hoped this day would never come. They had done everything possible to avoid it. But some things could not be avoided forever. He opened a channel to his fleet commanders across 100 hidden bases. "This is Admiral Okonkwo," he said. "Activate Protocol Omega. The waiting is almost over." Across the galaxy, humanity continued to smile. They continued to be polite. They gave no sign that anything had changed. But deep in the darkness between stars, something was waking up. Something old. Something patient. Something that the galaxy had forgotten existed. The aliens thought humans were prey. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The morning of March 15th, 2347, began like any other on New Meridian. The artificial sun inside the main dome brightened slowly, mimicking the dawn that colonists remembered from Earth. Children got ready for school. Workers headed to their jobs. The smell of coffee and breakfast filled the air in thousands of homes. Maria Santos woke up early that day. She had a field trip planned with her class to visit the ice caves. She was so excited that she could barely eat her breakfast. Her mother laughed and told her to slow down. Her father promised to meet them at the caves during his lunch break. "Don't forget Mr. Whiskers," her grandmother called as Maria ran to catch the school transport. Maria ran back and grabbed her stuffed rabbit. She hugged her grandmother tight. "I love you, abuela. I love you too, little one. Have fun today." Those were the last words they ever spoke to each other. At exactly 9:47 a.m. local time, the sky above New Meridian turned red. The colonists looked up in confusion. Some thought it was a malfunction in the dome's lighting system. Others thought it might be some kind of celebration they had forgotten about. Then the first impact hit. The Kralith had not come to negotiate. They had not come to give warnings. They had brought a full battle fleet with orbital bombardment platforms. These were weapons designed to burn entire continents. They were meant for wars against other spacefaring empires. The Kralith used them on a colony of civilians. The first shot struck the capital city of New Hope. 50,000 people died in an instant. The dome shattered, and the freezing air rushed in to claim anyone who had survived the initial blast. Before anyone could understand what was happening, a second shot hit the industrial district. Then a third hit the residential zones. Maria's school transport was 3 kilometers from the ice caves when the attacks began. The driver, a young man named Thomas, saw the explosions in the distance. He did not hesitate. He drove the transport into the nearest cave entrance and told the children to run deeper into the tunnels. "Stay together," he shouted. "Don't stop until you can't hear the explosions anymore." Maria ran with the others. She was crying, but she did not stop. She held Mr. Whiskers against her chest and kept moving. Behind them, Thomas stayed at the entrance, trying to contact anyone who could help. The last thing the children heard was his voice calling for rescue before the signal went dead. The bombardment lasted for 4 hours. When it finally stopped, there was nothing left. The beautiful domes were gone. The cities were craters. The parks where children had played were fields of glass and ash. 2,300,000 people had lived on New Meridian that morning. By afternoon, almost all of them were dead. The 12 survivors were found 3 days later by a human rescue ship. They had hidden deep in the ice caves, so far underground that the bombardment could not reach them. Most of them were children from Maria's school trip. The youngest was Maria herself. When the rescue workers found her, she was sitting alone in the darkness. She was not crying anymore. She had no tears left. She just sat there, holding her burned stuffed rabbit, staring at nothing with eyes that had seen too much. The rescue worker who found her was a woman named Captain Sarah Chen. She had served in the fleet for 20 years. She had seen many terrible things, but when she saw that little girl sitting in the dark, something broke inside her. "It's okay," Sarah said softly, kneeling beside Maria. "You're safe now. I'm going to take you home." Maria looked at her with empty eyes. "I don't have a home anymore," she said. Sarah Chen held the little girl as they flew away from the dead world. She made a silent promise that day. Someone would pay for this. Someone would answer for what happened here. She was not the only one making that promise. News of the massacre spread across human space within hours. People gathered in the streets, not to riot, but to stand in silence. Candles were lit. Names were read, 2,300,000 names. It took 3 days to read them all. In the halls of the Galactic Concord, Ambassador Elena Vasquez demanded an emergency session. Her voice was calm, but those who knew her could see the change. The warmth was gone from her eyes. The patience that had defined her for 15 years had disappeared. "This was genocide," she said to the assembled representatives. "This was the deliberate murder of civilians, children, families, people who had no weapons and posed no threat. The Kralith must be held accountable." The Kralith ambassador stood and adjusted his robes. He looked bored. "The humans were trespassing on sacred Kralith territory," he said. "We gave them 6 months to leave. They chose to stay. The consequences were their own fault." "6 months?" Elena's voice rose. "Your fleet arrived 3 days after your announcement. There was no time to evacuate anyone. Administrative delays are not our concern." The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to the Velthari representative, who served as the voice of the Concord. "This is a tragic situation," the Velthari said slowly. "But the Concord cannot interfere in territorial disputes between member species. The Kralith claim to this system predates human settlement. While we regret the loss of life, we cannot hold the Kralith responsible for defending their own territory." Elena stared at him. For a long moment, she said nothing. The silence grew heavy and uncomfortable. "I see," she finally said. Her voice was soft now, almost gentle, but there was something in it that made several delegates shift nervously in their seats. "So this is the justice of the Galactic Concord. Murder 2 million people, and there are no consequences. File the paperwork correctly, and genocide is acceptable." "Ambassador Vasquez, you are out of order." "No," Elena said. "For 200 years I have been in order. I have followed your rules. I have respected your processes. I have watched my people suffer and die while you did nothing. That ends today." She looked directly at the Kralith ambassador. "You are right about one thing. There will be no more discussion." She turned and walked toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed in the silent chamber. "Ambassador Vasquez," the Velthari called after her. "Where are you going? This session is not concluded." Elena stopped at the door. She did not turn around. "Humanity is withdrawing from the Galactic Concord effective immediately. All human citizens in Concord space will be evacuated within 48 hours. All treaties and agreements are hereby terminated." "You cannot do this," the Kralith ambassador snarled. "You are bound by Concord law." Now Elena turned. She smiled, but it was not the warm smile that the aliens had grown used to seeing. It was something else entirely. something cold. "We were bound by our choice to remain," she said. "We are no longer making that choice." She walked out and never looked back. Within 24 hours, every human ship in conquered space was heading home. Diplomats packed their offices. Traders closed their shops. Scientists abandoned their research posts. The evacuation was smooth and organized, as if it had been planned for years, because it had been. On the third day after the massacre, Admiral James Okonkwo received a message from Elena Vasquez. "It's time," she wrote. "Show them what we really are." The admiral looked at the image attached to her message. It was a photo of a little girl holding a burned stuffed rabbit. Her eyes were empty. Her world was gone. Okonkwo had commanded ships for 40 years. He had trained his entire life for battles he hoped would never come. He had watched his people suffer in silence, waiting for the right moment. That moment had arrived. He opened a channel to every human ship, every hidden base, every secret facility that the galaxy did not know existed. "This is Admiral Okonkwo. Operation Silent Thunder is now active. All units begin Phase 1. Maintain communications blackout. Trust your training. Remember New Meridian. Remember what they took from us." He paused and looked once more at the photo of Maria Santos. "And remember," he said quietly, "we gave them every chance." The channel closed. Across the galaxy, humanity went dark. The Concorde waited for human ships to return. They waited for angry messages and desperate pleas. They waited for the weakness they had always expected from the short-lived newcomers. Instead, they got silence. Complete and total silence. And in that silence, something terrible began to move. The first week of silence was confusing. The Galactic Concorde had expected humanity to come crawling back. They always did. Every young species went through a phase of anger and defiance before accepting their place in the galactic order. The Velthari representative assured everyone that humans would return within days, apologizing for their outburst and begging to rejoin the conquered. But the days passed, and no human ships appeared. No messages came. No diplomats requested meetings. It was as if 300 billion people had simply stopped existing. "They are hiding in shame," the Kralith ambassador declared during a Concord session. "The little prey animals have run back to their burrows. They know they cannot challenge us." Several delegates nodded in agreement. But a few of the older species exchanged worried glances. They remembered things that the younger races had forgotten. They remembered that silence was not always a sign of weakness. By the second week, the confusion turned to curiosity. Intelligence agencies across the Concorde tried to penetrate the communications blackout around human space. Their best hackers attempted to break into human networks. Their fastest spy ships tried to slip past human borders. Every attempt failed. The hackers found nothing but empty servers. The spy ships simply vanished. One day they were sending reports, and the next day they were gone. No distress signals. No debris. Just silence. "Equipment malfunctions," the Kralith High Command explained. "Human technology is primitive. Our ships probably encountered some kind of radiation field." No one believed this explanation, but no one wanted to admit they were worried about humans. The third week brought the first strange reports. A Kralith patrol squadron was conducting a routine sweep along the border between Kralith and human space. There were 6 ships in the squadron, each armed with enough weapons to destroy a small moon. They had made this patrol 100 times before. They never came back. Search parties found the ships 3 days later, drifting in the void. There was no damage to the hulls, no signs of weapons fire, no evidence of any attack at all. The ships were simply dead, floating like empty shells in the darkness of space. The crews were still alive. They were found sitting at their stations, eyes open, breathing steadily. But they did not respond to questions. They did not react to anything. They just sat there, staring at nothing, whispering the same words over and over again. "They came from the dark. They came from the dark. They came from the dark." Medical teams examined the survivors but found nothing physically wrong with them. Their bodies were healthy. Their brains showed normal activity. But something had broken inside their minds. Something had shown them a truth that their consciousness could not accept. The Kralith High Command classified the incident as a medical anomaly and ordered all records sealed. They did not want the public to know that 6 warships had been disabled without a single shot being fired. But the incidents continued. A military supply depot went silent. When investigators arrived, they found every computer wiped clean and every weapon gone. The personnel were alive but could not remember the past week. They only knew that someone had come in the night, and when they woke up, everything was different. A secret research station studying advanced weapons was found abandoned. The scientists had left in the middle of experiments, leaving food on their plates and coffee in their cups. Security footage showed nothing unusual until the moment it simply stopped. One frame showed normal activity. The next frame showed empty rooms. The Kralith began to whisper among themselves. Old soldiers who had fought many wars said they had never seen anything like this. This was not battle. This was not even sabotage. This was something else. Something that struck from the darkness and left no trace. This was hunting. The fourth week brought fear. The whispers spread beyond the military. Civilian ships reported strange sensor readings at the edge of human space. Shadows that moved when there should be nothing moving. Signals that appeared and vanished before they could be traced. A feeling of being watched by something vast and patient. Some captains refused to travel near the border. Others demanded triple pay for routes that had once been considered safe. The Kralith government insisted there was nothing to fear, but their words rang hollow. Then came the night of the broadcast. At exactly midnight, Galactic Standard Time, every communication device in Kralith space activated at the same time. Every screen, every holographic display, every personal communicator, billions of devices turned on simultaneously, showing the same image. It was the face of a little girl. She had black hair and empty eyes. She was holding a burned stuffed rabbit. Behind her, there was only darkness. The image lasted for 10 seconds. No one spoke. No one moved. Billions of Kralith stared at the face of a child they had helped murder. And for the first time in their history, they felt something they had never felt before. Guilt. Then text appeared below the image. It was written in perfect Kralith script, as if the message had been prepared specifically for them. We gave you 200 years of patience. You had every chance. Remember that tomorrow. The screens went dark. The silence returned. No one slept that night. In the Kralith High Command, military leaders gathered for an emergency session. They argued for hours about what to do. Some wanted to launch an immediate attack on human space. Others wanted to request help from the Concord. A few suggested surrendering, but they were shouted down as cowards. The supreme commander of the Kralith military was an old warrior named Torax. He had conquered 12 worlds in his career. He had never lost a battle. He had never felt fear. He felt it now. We do not know what we are facing, he said quietly. For 30 days, they have struck at will. They have destroyed our ships without firing a weapon. They have stolen our secrets without leaving a trace. They have broken the minds of our soldiers without touching their bodies. And we have not seen a single human ship. They are using tricks, another commander argued. Psychological warfare. They are trying to scare us because they cannot fight us directly. Torax shook his head. We burned their colony. We killed their children. If they could not fight us, they would have begged for mercy. Instead, they went silent. They planned. They waited. And now they are telling us that tomorrow, everything changes. He looked around the room at faces that had never known defeat. I have studied human history, he continued. I know what they are capable of when pushed beyond their limits. We thought we were the predators. We thought they were prey. We were wrong. Then what are they? Someone asked. Before Torax could answer, alarms began screaming throughout the command center. Officers rushed to their stations, checking sensors and communications. Report, Torax demanded. A young officer looked up with terror in his eyes. Ships, Supreme Commander. Human ships. Thousands of them. They have appeared in every system simultaneously. They are everywhere. Torax walked slowly to the main display screen. It showed a map of Kralith space, marked with red dots representing enemy contacts. The entire map was covered in red. There were so many ships that they looked like a swarm of angry insects descending on their prey. At the center of the swarm was a single ship larger than anything the Kralith had ever built. It was 15 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that their sensors could not even identify. It had not existed 6 months ago. No intelligence report had ever mentioned it. A communication signal came through. Torax accepted it. A human face appeared on the screen. It was a man with dark skin and calm eyes. He wore a military uniform covered in medals that Torax did not recognize. I am Admiral James Okonkwo of the Human Defense Fleet, the man said. Your bombardment of New Meridian killed 2,300,000 innocent people. We are here to collect payment. Torax straightened his shoulders. He was a warrior. He would face this with dignity. What are your terms? He asked. Surrender your military assets and your leadership will face trial for crimes against humanity. Refuse, and we will take them by force. We no longer care which option you choose. The transmission ended. Torax looked at his officers. Some were already preparing to surrender. Others were reaching for weapons to fight. He thought about his career, his victories, his empire. Then he thought about the face of a little girl holding a burned stuffed rabbit. For the first time in his life, he understood what he had really done. All units, he commanded, prepare for battle. He would lose. He knew that now. But he was Kralith. He would not surrender. Outside, the stars began to fill with fire. The sun rose over the Kralith homeworld on a morning that would change the galaxy forever. For 10,000 years, that sun had watched the Kralith build their empire. It had witnessed their conquests, their triumphs, their absolute certainty that they were the masters of all they surveyed. Now it watched their end begin. Admiral James Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the flagship Humanity's Answer. The ship was a monster of metal and fury, built in secret over decades in shipyards hidden in asteroid fields that no alien had ever found. Every piece of technology on board represented the best that human minds could create. Every weapon was designed for one purpose: to end wars before they could truly begin. Around him, his crew worked in perfect silence. There were no shouts, no celebrations, no battle cries. This was not a moment of glory for them. This was justice. Cold, precise, and absolute. All fleets report ready, Admiral, his first officer said. Okonkwo nodded. He looked at the tactical display showing Kralith space. His ships had appeared simultaneously in every system, surrounding the enemy before they even knew the battle had started. The Kralith were scrambling to respond, but they were already too late. Begin, he said simply. The first shots of the war came from weapons the Kralith did not understand. Human scientists had spent 2 centuries studying alien technology and finding ways to improve it. They had developed shields that adapted to incoming fire. They had created weapons that bypassed enemy defenses entirely. They had built engines that could move ships faster than anything in the known galaxy. The Kralith had never faced an enemy like this. In the Torax's system, a Kralith battle group of 40 ships formed a defensive line. They had fought 100 battles together. They had never been defeated. The commander gave the order to fire, and space lit up with energy weapons and missiles. The human ships simply moved. They flowed through the barrage like water through rocks, never staying still long enough to be hit. When they returned fire, their weapons went through Kralith's shields, as if they were not there. The first battleship died in seconds. The second followed. Then the third. The battle lasted 7 minutes. When it ended, all 40 Kralith ships were drifting wreckage, and not a single human vessel had been scratched. Similar scenes played out across Kralith space. At the frontier station, a massive military base that had taken centuries to build, human assault teams cut through security like it was not there. They moved in perfect coordination, speaking no words, showing no emotion. The Kralith soldiers who faced them had never seen warriors so disciplined. One Kralith officer managed to send a final report before his station fell. "They do not fight like us," he said, his voice shaking. "They do not roar or boast or show anger. They just work, like they are doing a job. Like killing us is just something that needs to be done." I have never seen anything so terrifying. The transmission ended with the sound of boots on metal and a door being forced open. On the Kralith homeworld, Supreme Commander Torax watched his empire crumble in real time. Reports flooded in from every system. Defeat after defeat after defeat. His mighty fleet, the pride of the Kralith people, was being dismantled piece by piece. "How is this possible?" one of his officers demanded. "They were weak. They were prey. They spent 200 years running from us." Torax laughed bitterly. "They were never running," he said. "They were waiting, learning, preparing. We thought their patience meant they could not fight. We were fools." He turned to face his command staff. Many were wounded. All were afraid. "There is something you must understand about humans," he said. "I learned this too late. Their homeworld is what other species call a death world. It is filled with predators, poisons, disasters, and diseases. Every other intelligent species in the galaxy evolved on peaceful worlds where nature was kind. Humans did not. They clawed their way to the top of a world that tried to kill them every single day. He pointed at the tactical display, where human ships were systematically destroying the last Kralith defenses. They are not peaceful because they are weak. They are peaceful because they choose to be. For 200 years, they made that choice every single day. They smiled while we insulted them. They negotiated while we attacked them. They buried their dead and filed their complaints and never once showed us what they really were. His voice dropped to a whisper. We made them stop choosing peace. And now we are learning what humans become when they stop being patient. The final battle took place in orbit above the Kralith homeworld. Torax had gathered every remaining ship for a last stand. 300 vessels against a human fleet that numbered in the thousands. It was not a battle. It was an execution. But the Kralith fought anyway. They fought because their honor demanded it. They fought because surrender was not in their nature. They fought because they knew that if they did not, humanity would still grant them justice. And Kralith pride could not accept mercy from those they had called prey. The battle lasted 6 hours. Human ships moved through the Kralith formation with terrible precision. They targeted weapons and engines first, disabling rather than destroying when possible. Admiral Okonkwo had given clear orders: minimize casualties. This was not revenge. This was accountability. But the Kralith would not stop fighting. Ship after ship was disabled, and still the survivors attacked. Small fighters threw themselves at human vessels in suicide runs. Damaged cruisers tried to ram their enemies. The Kralith died with weapons in their hands, just as their ancestors had for 10,000 years. When the last Kralith ship finally went silent, Okonkwo bowed his head for a moment. He was a soldier. He understood courage, even in an enemy. The Kralith had been monsters, but they had faced their end with bravery. Launch ground operations, he ordered. Standard rules of engagement. Protect civilians. Target only military and government facilities. Human soldiers landed on the Kralith homeworld within the hour. They moved through cities that had never known invasion, through streets where citizens cowered in fear. The soldiers did not loot. They did not destroy. They did not harm anyone who did not resist. They simply took control. The Kralith High Command was captured by evening. Torax was found in his bunker, sitting alone in the dark. He had sent his staff away hours ago. He had not tried to escape or hide. When the human soldiers entered, he stood and removed his weapons, placing them on the floor. I am Supreme Commander Torax, he said. I authorized the attack on New Meridian. The responsibility is mine. The human officer who faced him was a young woman with cold eyes. She looked at the old warrior for a long moment. You will face trial for your crimes, she said. Human law grants all accused the right to defense and the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. You will be treated according to our standards, not yours. Torax frowned in confusion. You are not going to execute me? We are not you, the officer said. We do not murder prisoners. We do not bomb civilians. We do not become the monsters we fight against. That is what separates us from you. She gestured for him to follow. Come. You have much to answer for. Across the galaxy, news of the battle spread like fire. The Galactic Concord watched in shocked silence as a species they had dismissed as weak dismantled one of the most powerful empires in history. In 6 hours, humanity had done what no one believed possible. They had broken the Kralith, but what came next surprised everyone even more. Instead of enslaving their defeated enemy, humans began to rebuild. Medical teams treated wounded Kralith soldiers. Engineers started repairing damaged infrastructure. Food and supplies were distributed to civilian populations. The conquest became an occupation. The occupation became a reconstruction. In the halls of the Concord, representatives whispered to each other in fear and amazement. They could have destroyed everything, the Velthari ambassador said. They could have taken revenge for centuries of mistreatment. Instead, they show mercy. Why? No one had an answer. On the humanity's answer, Admiral Okonkwo received a message from Earth. It was from the families of New Meridian, the survivors and relatives of those who had died. Thank you, the message said. Justice has been done. But please remember that vengeance and justice are not the same. Do not become what we lost our loved ones fighting against. Honor their memory by being better than our enemies. Not the same as them. Okonkwo read the message 3 times. Then he forwarded it to every ship in the fleet. Humanity had won the war. Now came the harder task. winning the peace. And somewhere on Earth, in a quiet hospital room, a little girl named Maria Santos slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. In her arms, she held a burned, stuffed rabbit. Justice would not bring back her family. Nothing could do that. But at least now she knew that their deaths had not been ignored. The galaxy would remember, and it would never make the same mistake again. 1 year had passed since the day humanity broke the Kralith Empire. In that time, the galaxy had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The Kralith homeworld, once the center of a mighty civilization built on conquest, was now a world slowly healing from its wounds. Human engineers worked alongside Kralith workers to rebuild cities. Human doctors trained Kralith medical staff in techniques that saved lives every day. Human teachers opened schools where Kralith children learned a history their parents had tried to hide from them. The war trials had lasted 6 months. Every Kralith leader involved in the New Meridian massacre had faced human courts. They were given lawyers. They were allowed to speak in their own defense. The evidence against them was presented openly for the entire galaxy to see. Supreme Commander Torak stood before the judges on the final day of his trial. He had admitted his guilt weeks ago. He had not tried to make excuses or shift blame to others. He had simply told the truth about what he had ordered and why. "I believed humans were weak," he said. "I believed that might makes right, and that the strong deserve to rule the weak. I was taught this from birth. Every Kralith is taught this from birth. I did not question it until I saw my empire burn." He looked directly at the human judges. "What you have done in the past year makes no sense to me. You could have enslaved us. You could have taken everything we have. Instead, you rebuild what you destroyed. You heal the wounds you made. You show kindness to those who showed you only cruelty." His voice dropped. "I do not understand mercy, but I am beginning to see that there is more strength in giving it than in demanding submission. Perhaps that is the lesson my people needed to learn." The judges found him guilty. His sentence was life imprisonment, but he would serve it on a rehabilitation station where he would help teach other war criminals about the path to redemption. It was not the death he expected. It was not the death he deserved by Kralith standards. It was human justice. Strange and soft and somehow more powerful than anything his people had ever known. Across the former Kralith Empire, similar scenes played out. Those who had committed crimes faced consequences, but the innocent were protected. Families were not punished for the actions of their leaders. Children grew up knowing that the humans who had conquered their world were not coming to hurt them. Some Kralith could not accept this. They whispered about revenge and restoration, about driving the humans away and rebuilding what was lost. But these voices grew quieter each year. It was hard to hate people who fed your children and healed your sick. On Earth, life slowly returned to normal. The war had been short, but its impact would last forever. Memorials were built for the victims of New Meridian. Maria Santos, the little girl with the burned rabbit, became a symbol of everything humanity had fought for. Her face was known across the galaxy, a reminder of why the war had happened and what was at stake. Maria herself was 11 years old now. She lived with a foster family who loved her as their own. She still carried Mr. Whiskers everywhere, though the stuffed rabbit was more patches than original fabric at this point. She was in therapy twice a week, learning to process the trauma that no child should ever have to experience. Some days were harder than others. Some nights, she still woke up screaming. But she was healing, slowly, in her own time. When reporters asked her what she thought about being a symbol, she always gave the same answer. "I'm not a symbol. I'm just Maria. And I miss my family every single day. But I know they would want me to be happy. So I try. That's all anyone can do." Her words were broadcast across the galaxy. Billions of beings heard them and felt something shift inside their hearts. In the Galactic Concord, the day of Ambassador Elena Vasquez's return finally arrived. The great chamber was silent as she walked to the central podium. The representatives of 47 species watched her with a mixture of fear, respect, and shame. They remembered dismissing her complaints. They remembered laughing at her patience. They remembered thinking that humans were too weak to matter. None of them were laughing now. Elena stood at the podium and looked around the room. She was older than she had been a year ago. There were more lines on her face and more gray in her hair. But her eyes were the same, calm, patient, and somewhere deep beneath the surface, something that had not been there before. "Steel. Let me begin by saying what I should have said a long time ago," she started. We did not want this. We did not want war. We did not want to destroy the Kralith Empire or frighten the galaxy or prove anything to anyone. We wanted what every species wants: to live in peace, to raise our children, to explore the stars without fear. She paused. For 200 years, we tried to earn your respect through patience and diplomacy. We absorbed every insult, every injury, every injustice, because we believed that peace was worth more than pride. We thought that if we showed you kindness, you would eventually see us as equals. Her voice hardened. We were naive. The chamber remained absolutely silent. The Kralith taught us an important lesson. They taught us that some people will never respect kindness. They will see it as weakness and take advantage of it. They will push and push and push until they find your breaking point, and then they will blame you for what happens next. She looked directly at the Kralith section of the chamber, where the few remaining Kralith diplomats sat in shame. We do not blame the Kralith people for the crimes of their leaders. We do not believe in punishing children for the sins of their parents. But we will never forget what happened on New Meridian. We will never forget what it cost us to learn this lesson. She turned back to the full assembly. Let me be absolutely clear about what humanity is. We are not aggressive. We do not seek conquest or empire. We have no desire to rule anyone but ourselves. Every day, we wake up and choose to be peaceful. We choose to negotiate instead of fight. We choose to build instead of destroy. That choice is a gift we give to the galaxy. Her voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow it filled the entire chamber. But we are not incapable of violence. We are not helpless. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. We survived ice ages and plagues and predators and disasters. We learned to fight long before we learned to speak. The universe is dark and cold and cruel, and we are very, very good at surviving in it. She smiled then. It was not a warm smile. The Kralith thought we were prey. They learned otherwise. I hope the rest of you are smarter than they were. She straightened and took a deep breath. Humanity is returning to peace. We want to be your friends, your partners, your family among the stars. We believe that cooperation is better than competition, and that understanding is better than fear. We will work with any species that treats us with basic dignity and respect. Her eyes swept across the chamber one final time. But if you mistake our kindness for weakness, if you attack our people, if you harm our children, we will respond. And I promise you, on behalf of every human being who has ever lived or ever will live, you will not enjoy our response. She stepped back from the podium. That is all I have to say. May the galaxy find the peace that we all deserve. The silence lasted for a long moment. Then the Velthari representative stood. The Concord wishes to formally apologize to humanity for our failures over the past 2 centuries. We should have listened when you spoke. We should have acted when injustice was done. We failed you, and we failed ourselves. He bowed his head. The Concord unanimously votes to grant humanity a permanent seat on the High Council, with full voting rights and all associated privileges. From this day forward, humanity will be treated as an equal partner in galactic governance. Similar statements followed from species after species. Apologies were offered. Promises were made. Old treaties were torn up and new ones negotiated. The galaxy's power structure shifted in a single afternoon. Elena accepted the apologies gracefully. She shook hands and made speeches and did everything a diplomat was supposed to do. But when she finally returned to her quarters that evening, she sat alone in the dark for a long time. She thought about the 2 million people who had died on New Meridian. She thought about all the colonists who had been killed or kidnapped over 2 centuries of patient suffering. She thought about the price that humanity had paid to finally be seen as equals. It was too high. It should never have been necessary. But that was the past. The future was still unwritten. On a small planet at the edge of human space, a memorial was being built. It would list the names of everyone who had died at New Meridian. In the center of the memorial, there would be a statue of a little girl holding a stuffed rabbit. Below the statue, carved in stone in 100 languages, would be words that the galaxy would never be allowed to forget. We came in peace. We asked only for respect. We were patient beyond measure. But our patience had limits. Remember this. Remember them. And never make us remind you again. The stars were still cold and uncaring. The universe was still vast and dangerous. But somewhere in the darkness, humanity had found its place, not as prey, not as predators, but as something in between. something that chose peace but was capable of war, something that offered kindness but demanded respect, something that the galaxy had underestimated once and would never underestimate again. The age of human patience had ended. The age of human respect had begun. And somewhere, watching from whatever afterlife existed, 2 million souls finally rested easy. Their deaths had not been in vain. The galaxy remembered. The galaxy would always remember.